Hello again, Steve here of the Inner Genie Project. And I wanted to talk about this concept, I am, today. I was with some friends yesterday and they watched a video by a guy named Muji, who's some kind of a spiritual leader. And though I'm not going to talk much about the content of that video, it just reminded me of something that had come across before, because so often words, we can learn things from words, and we can learn things in how words are possibly related, though I don't know if it is related, the word I, as in the capital I, and the word I, as in EYE. However, this other video I had watched a while back was by Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about the all-seeing eye and how this is an archetype of a higher aspiration, you might say, of the human condition. And he talks a lot about archetypes of older gods and so on, and how certain ones were the all-seeing eye. And a lot of these archetypes, of course, are supposed to tell us something about ourselves, right? Because if it's just about ancient history, what's the point? Now, a good question, because he was talking about anxiety in there, and the anxious individual has the aversion to looking at somebody else's eyes. They want to look down, so their seeing eye is no longer awake, right? Whereas the confident individual has their head up and they're looking around. They have that sight, and they have their eyes accessible, right? Accessible to look at other people's eyes, but also other people could look at their eyes. And there's an old saying. This is another part of this thought process. The old saying is that the eyes are the window to the soul, right? Of course, that brings up the concept of soul, and by soul and so on. As I've mentioned here before, to me, soul is akin to the term solo, right? The individual, the core of the individual, as opposed to group or tribe or whatever. The soul is that individual life force or whatever, that individualized expression. Now, we really want to connect with somebody. What do we look at? A depth of connection. Okay, some people are going to stare at somebody's chest and look at somebody's ass from time to time and so on. But to make a real connection, we look at the eyes, because it's through the eyes that we see the flickering of the emotions that are going on, the attentiveness. We can see. We don't know the exact thoughts that flash across, but we can see changes that take place within an individual's consciousness by looking at the eyes. And by looking at the eyes, we can see if there's attentiveness. By looking at the ears, we can't. By looking at the back of the head, we can't really. By looking at the shoulders, we can't really. Except for certain motions, maybe. Certainly by looking at somebody's ass, we might not be able to tell much. But the eyes can actually see flickering of emotional play or thought processes taking place, and we can make that connection, right? And we can see the other self. In other words, it's a deep connection. So through the eyes, we can see the other one on a deeper level, and they can see us on a deeper level. And because of that, we can actually relate. We can relate, right? And Jordan Peterson was talking about another thing, which I think was very valuable, which is the result of looking outward and looking at others is it takes the attention off of ourselves momentarily. So those who are anxious and who have their heads down, they're not looking. Everything is being reflected inward, and they're repeating in a way through their actions and through their experience this reinforcement of the anxiety. Whereas when looking out, we can put our attention on something momentarily, and it changes. I noticed this, for example, in public speaking, whereas before the presentation is where most of the turmoil is, because the experience is with self. It is reflection, it is rehearsal, and so on. But once on the stage, and with looking at people, not looking at the group, but looking at the individuals, and connecting with some of them, my attention is no longer just here. It's in the connection, right? So that gone is that kind of anxiety typically with practice. So I just thought it was interesting. Not a lot of real insight here, but the connection of the I am with the I, because the I being the connection to what is traditionally called the soul or the core self, the window. The window, what is a window? We have to look through it to get to something, right? And the I, of course, is a physical thing. It's part of the body, so we have to look at the body. And what do we see through that? We see thoughts and emotions through that eye to see the soul. So to see the soul is to see the body, mind, and emotions of another individual. And this is why, to me, in this conversation I had with friends a few days ago, there was a lot of put down, it seemed like, about to do with the physicality, the mentality, and maybe even the emotionality of the individual, as opposed to this greater self. But more and more as I see it, the only way to really grapple and understand a greater depth of knowledge is to understand that window, that vehicle we call body, we call mind, we call emotions, all packaged together, the holy trinity of effective self, if you will. And I think that the eyes are incredibly important. So those of us who have the gift of eyesight, if we can learn to look into people's eyes more and be okay when people look into our eyes, I think we can learn a lot about ourselves. And certainly, if the goal is to become less anxious and more confident, it is also an excellent practice to get into, I would say. Steve here again. Great chatting, and may you exercise your all-seeing eye. Take care. Bye for now.